I've explained the importance of using the grid in your design and the difference between fixed and fluid widths in your design. But then how do we code all of these different grids into your design? Because that's the big difference between print design and web design. We have to code all of this. And then we come down to the problem of numbers. So if your design is 1000 pixels wide, how are you going to do 3 columns wide in that? You can't have a third of a pixel. Similarly, if you wanted it to be a quarter, that's okay. It could be 250 pixels wide, but other numbers might not accommodate that. And so designers in the fixed width days came up with the 960 grid. And that was a 12 column grid that fit within 960 pixels. So this was a bit after the days of the 800 pixel wide monitors. Now 960 pixels was great because it fit within a 1024 pixel wide monitor. And so you could divide it quite easily into the different columns. If you wanted to take advantage of the rule of thirds, 960 pixels, that would end up being 320 pixels per column. If you wanted to have 2 columns, that would be 480 pixels wide. And so you could divide it up very nicely. 12 is a great number of these different columns, and you would always just have to make sure that whatever width of a grid you're using has to be a multiple of 12. So you have the 960 grid, you have the 1200 grid, and so on. But the important thing was it had to be based on 12 because 12 has all of those lovely factors, the numbers it can be divided by. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And if you have a look here, I've got an example where you can see all the different column choices you have with a 12 column grid. So we've got 1 column wide down here. We've got 2 columns, and in fact, rather than say column, I think I'll say section, because otherwise you're starting to say 6 columns of 2 columns wide each. So 6 sections, they're 2 columns wide. 4 sections, 3 columns wide. 3 sections, they're 4 columns wide. And up here you see how you can combine them. So we've got 2 columns over here and 5 here. It always has to add up to 12. You can't go over 12 or it wraps strangely. It will push the next column down below it. But you can see these combinations that you can have here. And if we have a look at some examples here, we can see this 12 column layout. You might have a head and a menu up here, a footer down here, blank, blank, hero item in the middle. All of this is made up of sections or columns, which are based on the 12 column grid. A different layout just here, another one here where you've got brand, a shopping bag, text here, image here, a slideshow, and we've got lots of little images down here, each 1 column wide each. Add. You can see that all websites are basically built of these 12 columns. So here's an image with the 12 column grid laid out over a typical website, and you'll find that if you take any screenshot of a website, you will be able to divide it into those 12 columns. So this is what happens with a fluid website though. When you shrink it, you see how our columns get really narrow. That's what I mentioned in the last video, that there had to be changes made when mobile devices came into it, and that became way too small. And we'll deal with that in week 7. If we have a look at fixed widths, if I start shrinking this page, you see how it wraps my columns instead. Now that might not be optimal as well, because like this 11 column and 1 column looks very, very strange, and it still chops off our wide columns. So not ideal. So in the next video, I'll talk about how you can take your designs into wireframes, do some planning on the structure of your website and all of the components therein, and then how you can use that wireframe to figure out what widths all of your columns will be.